Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Store Media Network. I'm your host, Kanaye, and we are now in the fun part of the offseason for UConn men's basketball, where we get to talk about some transfer portal targets that the program has either already contacted or some other guys that have not been contacted, up to my belief when I'm recording this, that I do think UConn should look to reach out to, as I think they'd be good additions to the roster next year with the obvious holes that are left to fill going into next year's season. Now, there's also some stuff we got to talk about regarding who's already entered the portal from UConn, as well as who UConn's losing to pro basketball, and some big time draft deadline portal decisions that are yet to come. So a lot of stuff to get into on today's episode. But before we do that, just a couple quick messages. First, us here at the Court Store, and we've partnered with Phorm Energy to tell you about all the great products they have to offer. Whether you're someone who's an active gym goer or just needs to stay energized in their day-to-day life, Phorm has products that you need. And if you're interested in seeing what else they have to offer, I'll be plugging the link to their full website in our description box below. And as always, just engage with the content on this channel in any way you can, whether you're liking, subscribing, or telling other people about what we do here at the Court Store. Everything goes a really long way in getting more people to see what we put out. So let's get right into it. I think it's first probably a good place to start with what UConn is losing. Now, obviously, Alex Caravan graduated. Terrace Reed is going to graduate too. Malachi Smith, you're losing because of exhausted eligibility as well, along with Dwayne Karoma and Alec Melender. Now, those are three guys that obviously played a lot of minutes this past year, and big holes that you got to fill between the starting four spot, the starting center spot, and obviously some bench guard minutes that we got from Malachi that need to get filled. So those are definitely three spots of emphasis that I'm sure the staff is looking into right now. And they've already contacted some guys to play those positions to be able to come in next year and fill those roles. Before we get on some of those guys that are I'll touch on, another big loss, we got to talk about who's entered the portal right now. Now, knowing my luck, by the time I'm finished recording this, we'll hear about another guy from UConn hitting the portal, or we'll hear about a commitment. But hopefully none of that happens before I upload this video, which should be going up on Saturday, April 11th. Now, Eric Ryba, which I'm sure came to all of you watching as much as it did to me, a massive surprise in hearing that he is going to enter the transfer portal. This is a guy that definitely would have been the starting center for UConn next season. And now that he's gone, you obviously have you're kind of in scramble mode, because you also lose Rezon Alize, who was obviously the fourth string center this year. Was probably going to be third, maybe at highest second string center next year. But that's obviously out the window. So you got to get some depth at the center spot as well. Now, in terms of the guys right now that you're on the cusp of being able to get back, or guys who should be able to get back, obviously Braylon Mullins is a big decision to make as to whether he chooses to go to the NBA, where he could end up being a lottery pick, or coming back to STORRS for his sophomore season. Now, on the other episode that is going up today, I talked about my viewpoints on where I stand with Braylon's decision. I'm going to back him as a fan. No matter what he chooses, I think he would probably benefit from one more year in school. But at the same time, I think his play style fits the current landscape of the NBA. And I think he's definitely deserving of going in the lottery of this year's NBA draft. So it's definitely kind of a waited out and see process. It'll probably be similar to Alex Caravan, what he did following his sophomore year. We kind of waited till fully going through the draft process to ultimately decide a return for his junior season in 24-25. So again, hope to get Braylon back, but that's definitely up in the air. And I'll definitely talk about a guy that I think would make a great addition on the wing that could just be a creator too. He'll actually be the first guy to talk about. But as for Solo Ball and Silas Demery, I expect Silas Demery to be back. I also expect Solo Ball to be back. Solo, I worry more than Silas in terms of who I think could transfer out of the two guys in the backcourt that I think will return. But at the same time, I think Solo, if he was going to transfer, probably would have been after last season. And this year, he obviously did not play up to what we thought he was going to be. I think a lot of that was just attributed to his wrist injury, his foot injury, and obviously some pretty big confidence issues that I think were because of those injuries and him not shooting the ball the way he wanted to this year. I expect Solo Ball to be back and have a much better year than what we saw out of him this season. Silas Demery, he says he wouldn't want to be anywhere else following the Final Four, so I would expect him to be back in STORRS for his senior season. I expect him to be contending to be a first-team All-American the way T. New did in his grad year in STORRS. So it would be great to get both those guys back. Now, in terms of Jalen Stewart, Jaden Ross, very up in the air. A lot of that's going to be pending on the direction the staff, Dan Hurley, and this program want to move in. If they want to just stick with seniority and stick with their kind of loyal approach that they've been going with for years now, both those guys I expect to be back, and I expect them to have much larger roles than anything we've seen out of those two guys' roles in the 3 years they've been in STORRS right now, up to this point, I should say. I want both those guys back. I think they obviously have winning pedigree. They've played in a lot of big games, and they know the system. They know what to expect from Hurley. They know what Hurley expects out of them, and I think it would be good to get both those guys back. But if you lose both, then even if you lose one, you kind of are again in scramble mode. You got to find some added depth on the wing. There's definitely a lot of wing pieces that I'm going to be talking about on this video today that are currently in the portal that I think UConn should try to contact to get on the roster next year. In terms of the other guys on the bench, obviously you have Jacob Furphy, who I think we're definitely going to see him take a big leap in terms of what his role is going to be. I think we could see him get some minutes running back a point when Silas is off the floor. If Silas does return, I really do think that Jacob is going to really blossom into what is a productive college player. I don't know how long he's going to stay around in STORRS. Could be one more year, could be two. We'll see. But I think Jacob Furphy definitely has a lot of untapped potential. I know he didn't see all too many minutes this year, but he did have an injury in the early parts of the year that I think kind of led to him having a smaller role than what I maybe expected of him going into the year with how well he played in the U19 World Cup. I think Junior County is also going to be able to relieve some of those backup point guard duties. He obviously is a little bit of a taller guard, which Hurley likes, and I think he's a really talented piece. I expect UConn probably doesn't go too heavy on getting bench guards in the portal between just what you have with Junior County and Jacob Furphy. I think Coleman Landrew also might help mitigate some of the problems in finding depth on the wing if you don't get Stewart and Ross back. So I'm really excited for what we could get between Junior County and Coleman Landrew this upcoming season. Now, to actually get into the guys that UConn has either contacted or I think should contact to bring in out of the portal for this upcoming season, 26-27. Let's start with Alex Wilkins. Obviously, this program is very familiar with Alex Wilkins. This is a guy that I mentioned after my recap of the Phorm and UConn first round game. I came out and said, hey, I would not be shocked if this is a guy that UConn tries to go after in the transfer portal this offseason. Now, I know he plays point guard. I know he was the lead guard for Phorm in this past season, and UConn already has a lead guard in Silas Demery Jr. But when you think back to the most successful teams that Dan Hurley's had at UConn, he always had multiple guys who were capable of handling the rock and being playmakers, being creators. Think back to 2023. You had obviously Tristan Newton alongside Andre Jackson, two guys who could obviously create for others, create shots on their own. Following year, you have three essentially functional point guards on the floor between T. New, Cam Spencer, and Steph Castle. This year, I think Hurley should try to take a very, very similar approach, and I think he will, to constructing his roster similarly to what we saw in 23 and 24, instead of this past season where it was really only Silas being the guy who could go out and get his own. So I think Alex Wilkins will definitely be a great get. He averaged nearly 18 points per game this past year with Furman to go with 2 rebounds and nearly 5 assists. I think he's a really talented player who took, maybe not the most conventional route to being a Power 5 player. He's heard from every Power 5 program in the country since he entered his name into the portal. And I just think that's the approach a lot of freshmen coming out of high school are going to take, where they maybe go down a level instead of playing immediately at a Power 5 school where they won't see the minutes they want, where they can prove themselves at a smaller school where they're the guy, and then obviously hit the portal the following year and end up where they originally wanted to be coming out of high school. So I do think UConn kind of has the advantage here because they played against him. I'm sure the staff is very, very familiar with him. They can visualize what they see out of him moving forward. And he is from New England. He is a Massachusetts native. So that obviously plays into UConn's advantage, him essentially kind of being from their backyard and wanting to maybe go back closer to home and play in STORRS, Connecticut. I've been vocal that I think Alex Wilkins has a lot of Tristan Newton in him. Taller guy, running the point, has, not the largest frame, but he definitely plays a lot bigger than what he might look like when you're watching him out on the game floor. Talented scorer, no fear. We saw those shots he hit against UConn in that first round game where it just seemed like he couldn't miss in the first half from three, going up against Malachi Smith and Alec Millender, who were just really hounding him defensively. I think Alex Wilkins will be a stellar ad for UConn, and just having another guy in your lineup who can go and get his own, call his own number, get to the basket, draw fouls, which this past year's team obviously struggled with mightily. And I think he's a talented passer too. I think he's probably a more proven passer than Silas Demery was coming into UConn. We already saw the leap that Silas made. So I definitely think that Alex Wilkins would be a great get. And I do know that UConn has been confirmed to have gotten in contact with him. So love to see Alex Wilkins as a Husky next year. Just having another guy who can go out and create his own shot, obviously set up plays for others, is really going to be beneficial for what UConn wants to do as an offense next year. To get into the next guy, this is more so, these next three guys I'm going to talk about are more so would come in to fill that Alex Caravan role at the 4. The first guy who I know for sure has been contacted by UConn is Devin Royal. Devin Royal played at Ohio State this past season, or I should say for the first 3 years of his college career. He'll be a senior next year. He averaged 13.7 points per game this past year. We'll get to go with nearly 6 rebounds and just under 2 assists. He shot 47% from the floor and 31% from three. Now, this is a high volume 3-point shooter. He had several games where he was able to knock down 4+ threes, and he plays physical. He can create his own shot, which is definitely beneficial, but he is a little undersized for a 4-man. He's 6'6", 220 pounds. He does play physical, and I like what he can provide going to the basket, but I do kind of worry that he isn't the most efficient shooter, and I don't know that if he's going to be capable of running around all those actions that UConn had Caravan doing this past, really for the 4 years that he was in STORRS. So I do think that it's tougher to bring in a guy to play the 4 role because of how smart of a player Alex Caravan was and how complex UConn's offensive schemes and their sets that they run are. I do think Devin Royal can do it. I understand Ohio State has not had the most success over the past couple seasons, and maybe getting into UConn's system, playing under Hurley is going to bring the best out of him. I think this will be a good get, but again, I am just a little concerned about the consistency in the 3-point shot. This is the first year they shot above 30% from beyond the arc, and it was just barely. So I obviously think, in the system that UConn runs, he's going to get a lot of good looks. You just got to make them. And if he ends up a Husky, which the way it kind of looks right now, it seems like it might end up that way with how much the program has been talking to Devin Royal, I think there's a very likely chance we see him suiting up in STORRS as Husky this next season. So to get on to the next guy, that is Paulius Morauskas from St. Mary's. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be hesitant when hearing the name St. Mary's because of Aiden Mahaney and how he just didn't pan out the way that everyone wanted him to. But I think it's a little bit different when you consider that Paulus is a front court player. Aiden Mahaney was kind of brought in to be the point guard of the 24-25 team. And Aiden Mahaney was never a point guard. He was an undersized combo guard, 2 guard, whatever you want to call him. And he was being brought in to run point for really the first time in his collegiate career. And he obviously struggled against the physicality and the size that he was going up against in the Big East. And when you consider those circumstances, when you expect a guy to come in and just immediately get it right away, it's just not a recipe for success. We obviously saw how long it took T-New to fully understand exactly how to execute UConn's offense the way it is supposed to be ran. Silas obviously took some time, and I still don't even think Silas is fully there. So I think it's tough to fault Mahaney so much for that, and I don't think it's fair to just completely throw any St. Mary's transfer out the door just because of what happened with Aiden Mahaney. So Paulius Morauskas, he's going to be a senior next year. He's 6'8", 235 pounds. One of the best players that you were going to find across the West Coast Conference this past year. He averaged nearly 18.5 points per game, nearly 8 rebounds, 2 assists to go with that, 48% from the floor, and 33% from three overall. He's a really talented scorer. Obviously, we would have to see how he translates his game up to the Power 5 level, but I do think it is going to be a much smoother transition for a front court player than it was like an Aiden Mahaney, a guard, for say, coming from a low major school. I think, I am a little bit deterred about just, his consistency, being able to hit the shot. I think he's a lot slower footed than Alex Caravan was. So I wonder if he's going to be able to run around those screens off the staggers, the curls, the way AK did. But nonetheless, I think this would be a really high-powered get. He has entered the portal with the do not contact tag, which leads you to infer that he's probably just going to join Randy Bennett, his former coach at St. Mary's, where he is now at Arizona State. But I think this is a guy worth reaching out to. It's going to be tough to with that do not contact tag. But nonetheless, I think if they were able to get this guy out of the portal, he would be a great add and definitely add some scoring pop to next year's roster. Now, to get on to the next guy, which I honestly think might be the best choice to fill that AK role if they decide to mitigate that hole by going into the portal. That's Alan Graves out of Santa Clara. Santa Clara obviously had a super successful season where they nearly beat Kentucky in the NCAA tournament. Alan Graves was a freshman this year. This past season, he has declared for the NBA draft, and there is a chance that he could go in the first round, but he has also entered the transfer portal with a do not contact tag, which obviously makes it a little bit tougher to reach out to guys. But nonetheless, if you are able to get in contact with him, this is a guy who averaged nearly 12 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, and nearly 2 assists. He shot 51% from the floor and 41% from three. And obviously, you need to see how his game translates when he jumps up a level to playing in the Big East. But I really do think that this guy has NBA potential written all over him. And I think a year at UConn is going to be enough to be able to get him to the league as what could be a surefire first round pick. He's 6'9", 225 pounds. I think if you're trying to find a guy that is most similar to what Alex Caravan provided you for 4 years, Alan Graves is the guy. I would honestly, again, prefer him over the other two that I just talked about, Devin Roy and Paulus Moravsky. I mean, I'm not going to be all too mad with whoever UConn ends up with out of the three if they do choose to supplement filling Alex Caravan's role through the transfer portal. But I just think what he can provide you, both offensively and defensively, where he nearly averaged 2 steals a game, can guard guys out on the perimeter, is definitely not a slouch when guarding post players either. This guy's going to bring you scoring pop. He's going to bring you some defensive tenacity and toughness. And I love everything about his game. And he was so productive at Santa Clara as a freshman. I think he would do wonders for what this UConn program's offensive ceiling can be, 627. And obviously, I think he definitely plays into becoming a repeat top 10 defensive team on KenPom as UConn was this past season. Listen, all three guys, I don't think either way, I don't think you could go completely wrong. There's definitely guys I'd rather have over others, but Alan Graves is number one for me. But Devin Roy and Paulus Moravsky, I would not be all too mad at no matter what. So to get into filling the center spot, this is where it gets a lot more dicey, because if we're calling it for what it is, the centers in this year's transfer portal class are not all too spectacular. Flory Badunga is head over heels the best center you're going to find in the transfer portal, and he's more than likely going to end up somewhere else. I've already seen a crystal ball for him to go to Louisville on 24/7 Sports. He's hearing from Michigan. He's hearing from Louisville. He's hearing from St. John's. Really hope he doesn't end up at St. John's for UConn's sake. But outside of him, there's really just not a lot of top flight guys that you're going to find to play center next year in the portal. So it's tough losing Eric. Eric really does put UConn at such a big disadvantage with him choosing to enter the portal, because now you got to, again, be in scramble mode and find the guy that's going to be manning down the paint. And that's obviously so important. The best teams under Hurley had great center play between Terrace Reed, Adama Sanogo, Donovan Clingan. And I just don't know that there's a guy in the portal that you're going to be able to add that can just be that game changer in the post, offensively and defensively. But to get into the two guys that I know UConn has contacted, one of them being another St. Mary's transfer, Andrew McKeever. This one I would definitely push back against. I didn't think he was all too impressive in the West Coast Conference. And, granted, he was an underclassman. He's going to be a junior next year, but it's going to be a lot different going up in the Big East. He did nearly average a double-double between his 8 points per game to go with 9 rebounds and 2 assists. But I think what concerns me the most is him being 7'2" and averaging under a block a game in the West Coast Conference. This is a guy who played 23 minutes a night, 7'2", as I just mentioned, 285 pounds, has a lot of size, I would assume, over most of the competition he faced in the West Coast Conference. And it's not going to get any easier in the Big East. And obviously, Dan Hurley is a really great developer of talent. And I think he can get into some untapped potential that's here with McKeever. And that's probably why UConn is reaching out to him. And I wouldn't trust any of their staff more than UConn's to be able to get a player to reach their ceiling as a college player. So if they end up with him, I'll live with it. I'll trust Hurley, his intuition, his staff's beliefs, and what they're going to be able to push McKeever to end up becoming. But right now, I just, it's a weak portal class for centers. So if they end up with him, I guess you got to do what you got to do. And I don't think it would be the end of the world. You can't teach height, but you can definitely teach post footwork, and you can definitely teach defensive prowess. And McKeever's got the height. You just got to teach him the in between the years stuff and how to process the game and everything. Now, the other big man that UConn has contact is Nahai Hines out of Seton Hall. This is a guy who UConn's obviously pretty familiar with, playing against him twice this year. In the first match of that, Seton Hall took UConn on at the Rock earlier at the start of Big East play this past season. He was really productive. He had 3 blocks in the game to go with what I believe was 10 points and 7 rebounds. He honestly could definitely be a game changer. It's still kind of a risk to take if you're bringing him in to be the starter, but I definitely think there's some untapped potential here. He's 6'10", 265, averaged 6.5 points, 5.5 rebounds on 60% shooting this season. He did average 2.2 blocks per game, so obviously maybe a little bit better at anticipating shots than McKeever is. And I honestly would be fine with bringing him in. I just think what definitely deters me with both these guys is I don't know what their offensive ceilings are as college players, but that obviously can be mitigated through UConn's elaborate sets and the plays they'll run to be able to get these guys easy looks at the rim and the baskets. I think that pretty much takes care of all of the targets that I know UConn has either reached out to or targets that I think they should go after. I think UConn's not going to be competing to get the top guys in the portal this year. You're not going to see him go out and get a Rob Wright. You're not going to see him go out and get a Floyd Badunga, nor a John Blackwell. But I definitely think that if you pluck the right pieces out of the portal this year, UConn is going to be in a great position next year entering the preseason and probably being a top 10, maybe top 5 team, and definitely having a realistic chance to get to Detroit, to cut down the nets, and finally go get number 7 after unfortunately not getting it this year. Now, again, knowing my luck, someone else is going to enter the portal from UConn, or UConn will announce a commitment from one of these guys. Maybe I talk about here today, or maybe someone else. But I will be sure to definitely update you guys, maybe at some point in the middle of the week, or maybe next Saturday, on any new moves that I hear UConn makes transfer portal wise. But until then, I'll see you all next time.